The morning my marriage officially died, I dressed like I was going to war. Black suit, hair pulled back, no jewelry except my wedding ring. I would take that off after today. After 15 years, I deserved that satisfaction. The courthouse steps felt colder than they should have for April. Richard was already inside somewhere, probably gripping his 23-year-old assistant's hand, whispering promises about their bright future together. They had no idea what was coming. My lawyer, Margaret Chen, stood beside me checking her briefcase one final time. She was the best family attorney in the city, and I had paid her very well to be thorough, meticulous, ruthless when necessary. "You ready for this, Sarah?" she asked, but her eyes were already gleaming. Margaret loved cases like mine, the ones where the cheating husband thought he held all the cards. I nodded, though my stomach churned. He thinks he knows everything about me, about our finances, about what I've been doing for the past 15 years. Margaret smiled, and it wasn't warm. Men like Richard never pay attention to their wives. That's always their first mistake. We walked through those courthouse doors, and I felt every eye turn toward us. Richard sat at the opposite table with his lawyer, some expensive suit who specialized in protecting wealthy men from their vindictive ex-wives. That's probably how they saw me. The bitter woman who couldn't accept that love dies. Richard barely glanced up when I entered. He was too busy scrolling through his phone, probably texting Melissa about how quickly they could get through this formality and start their real life together. But I noticed his lawyer studying me carefully. David Morrison had a reputation for being prepared, for knowing exactly what his opponents might try. He would have investigated my background, my potential claims. He thought he knew what this divorce would cost Richard. He was wrong. I had spent 6 months preparing for this moment. 6 months of careful planning while pretending to be the devastated wife, while letting Richard believe I was too heartbroken to think clearly about our separation. He thought I would take whatever settlement he offered and disappear quietly. The judge called the session to order, and Morrison stood to present Richard's case. He painted a picture of an amicable separation, 2 people who had simply grown apart, no-fault divorce, clean break. Richard would keep his consulting firm, the house, most of the investments. I would receive a modest monthly payment and walk away grateful for his generosity. "Your Honor," Morrison droned, "my client has been more than fair in his settlement offer. Mrs. Richardson will be comfortable, and both parties can move forward with their lives." Richard actually smiled when Morrison mentioned the settlement amount, $3,000 a month, after 15 years of marriage. Like I was a girlfriend he was paying off, not the woman who had built his entire life alongside him. But I had been building more than Richard's life. While he was busy climbing the corporate ladder and, apparently, climbing his assistant, I had been busy too, very busy. Margaret stood slowly, deliberately, the kind of movement that makes a room go quiet. "Your Honor, we appreciate Mr. Richardson's offer, but we have some additional information that significantly changes the financial picture of this marriage." I watched Richard's face, still smiling, still confident. Melissa squeezed his hand from the gallery behind us, and he squeezed back. They thought this was a formality. Margaret opened her briefcase and withdrew a thick folder. "Mrs. Richardson has been far more involved in the family finances than her husband realized. In fact, she has been the primary architect of their financial success." The first document she placed on the judge's desk was a business registration. Richardson Financial Consulting had been incorporated in my name, not Richard's. The business license, the tax filings, the corporate bank accounts, all established and maintained by me. Richard's smile flickered. "Furthermore," Margaret continued, "Mrs. Richardson has been the sole investor and managing partner of several profitable ventures that her husband was unaware of. Richardson Properties, Richardson Holdings, and Richardson Investment Group. I had used my maiden name, Chen, for those businesses. For 15 years, while Richard thought I was just managing our household finances, I had been building an empire. Every spare dollar, every bonus he brought home thinking it was his money to spend, every investment opportunity I quietly researched and executed. The consulting firm Richard thought he owned, I had founded it. The clients he bragged about landing, I had networked with their wives at charity events, built relationships, then fed him the connections. The investment strategies that made him look brilliant, I had developed them during my evening MBA program that he never bothered to ask about. Richard's face had gone completely white. Morrison was frantically whispering in his ear, but Richard just stared at the documents spreading across the judge's bench. Mrs. Richardson also maintained separate investment accounts during the marriage, as is her legal right. These accounts have grown considerably over 15 years of careful financial planning. The bank statements Margaret presented showed accounts totaling $2.8 million, money that Richard had no idea existed. Money I had earned, invested, and multiplied, while he thought I was just paying the grocery bills. But the real devastation came with the next folder. Your Honor, Mrs. Richardson has also been tracking certain irregularities in her husband's business practices. Mr. R. passed. Richardson has been using company funds for personal expenses, including gifts and travel for his extramarital affair. The receipts painted an ugly picture. Richard had been charging romantic dinners with Melissa to business expense accounts, hotel rooms in California when the firm had no clients there, jewelry purchases written off as client gifts, a weekend in Cabo that got billed as a business conference. Richard tried to speak, but Morrison grabbed his arm, too late for damage control. Margaret wasn't finished. Mrs. Richardson has also documented that her husband has been funneling money from their joint accounts into personal accounts that his wife was not informed about. We have evidence of systematic financial deception spanning 3 years. The hidden accounts contained nearly $400,000, money that Richard thought he had successfully tucked away for his new life with Melissa. Money he planned to claim didn't exist during the divorce proceedings. In addition, Margaret said, her voice cutting through the stunned silence, Mrs. Richardson holds the mortgage on the family home, the house that Mr. Prison of the Blaze at a Rettervash as Metarest Richardson wishes to keep was purchased with funds from her separate property account. He has been living in her house for 12 years, though the mortgage paperwork was structured to appear as a joint purchase. I watched Richard's world collapse in real time. The house he thought he would keep? Mine. The business he thought he owned? Mine. The financial security he thought he was protecting? Built on my work, my money, my careful planning. But Margaret saved the best for last. Finally, Your Honor, Mrs. Richardson holds a 51% controlling interest in Richardson Financial Consulting, the company that Mr. Plazid Andient from Lashen interest in Richardson Financial Consulting. Richardson has been representing as his own is actually majority owned by his wife. This ownership stake was established at the company's founding and has never been transferred. Richard finally found his voice. That's impossible. Sarah doesn't know anything about the business. She's never worked a day in her life. Margaret smiled and pulled out one more document. My master's degree in business administration from Northwestern, earned through night classes over 4 years. Dean's List every semester. Graduated summa cum laude 3 years ago. Mrs. Richardson has been working every day of her marriage, Mr. Richardson. You were simply too busy to notice. The judge reviewed the mountain of documentation for what felt like hours. Richard sat in stunned silence, occasionally whispering frantically with Morrison, who kept shaking his head grimly. Melissa had stopped squeezing Richard's hand. She was checking her phone, probably wondering if she should start looking for a new job. When the judge finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of legal finality. Based on the evidence presented, this court recognizes Mrs. Richardson's ownership interests and financial contributions to the marital estate. Mr. Richardson, you will retain a 49% interest in Richardson Financial Consulting, subject to Mrs. Richardson's controlling vote on all major business decisions. The family residence will remain sole property of Mrs. Richardson. Joint accounts will be divided according to documented contributions which appear to heavily favor Mrs. Richardson. Richard's jaw worked silently. Morrison was scribbling notes furiously, probably calculating how much his client had just lost. Furthermore, the judge continued, evidence of hidden accounts and fraudulent business expenses will be forwarded to the appropriate authorities for review. This court takes a dim view of financial deception during divorce proceedings. The final settlement was read aloud. Richard would pay me $4,000 a month in spousal support. He could remain as minority partner in the consulting firm. but only if he agreed to my operational oversight. The house would be mine entirely, though he could buy out my interest if he could secure financing. Which he couldn't, since I held the controlling vote in the business that would need to guarantee any loan. As we stood to leave, Richard finally looked directly at me for the first time all day. "How long have you been planning this?" he asked, his voice hollow. I considered lying, considered telling him it was all recent, that I had only started building my separate life after discovering his affair. But Richard deserved the truth. He had earned it. 15 years, I told him quietly. Since the day we got married, I've been protecting myself from exactly this moment. His face crumpled. "You never trusted me." "I trusted you completely," I replied. "I trusted you to be exactly who you are. A man who would leave his wife for a younger woman the moment life got complicated. I just made sure I would survive when you did." Margaret touched my arm, signaling it was time to go, but Richard grabbed my hand as I turned away. "Sarah, please. We can work this out. Melissa and I, it's not serious. We can fix this." I looked down at his hand holding mine, the same hands that had held Melissa, the same hands that had signed documents transferring our money into accounts with only his name. The same hands that had packed his suitcase while telling me he needed space to think. I pulled away gently. "Richard, you worked this out exactly the way you wanted. You wanted freedom, you wanted a young girlfriend, you wanted out of our marriage, you have all of those things." He stared at me, desperation creeping into his voice. "But the business, the house, you can't just take everything." "I'm not taking anything that wasn't already mine. You just never bothered to look close enough to see what you were married to." Margaret and I walked toward the courthouse exit, leaving Richard standing in the wreckage of his miscalculations. Melissa was nowhere to be seen, probably in the parking garage, calling headhunters. Outside, the April air felt warmer, cleaner. "How does it feel?" Margaret asked as we reached her car. I considered the question carefully. Relief, certainly. Vindication. The satisfaction of a plan executed perfectly. But underneath all of that, something sadder. The death of 15 years. The end of the life I had built, even if I was the one who had built it. "Like I can finally breathe," I said. That evening, I sat in my house, my kitchen, drinking wine from glasses I had chosen. The silence felt different now, not empty, but peaceful. For 15 years this space had held Richard's energy, his stress, his restless dissatisfaction with everything I provided. Now it was just mine. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Melissa." "I had no idea about any of this. Richard told me you were just a housewife. I'm sorry." I stared at the message for a long time before deleting it. Melissa wasn't the villain in this story. She was just another woman who believed a man's version of his marriage without asking questions. Another woman who thought she had found someone worth rebuilding her life around. She would learn, like I had learned, like every woman eventually learns, that you can't build a secure future on someone else's foundation. You have to build your own. 3 weeks later, Richard called me at the office. My office in the building I owned, running the company I had created. "Sarah, I need to talk to you about the Henderson account." It was the firm's largest client, a manufacturing company that brought in 40% of our revenue. Richard had been managing the relationship for 8 years, ever since he had impressed them with the investment strategy I had developed. "What about Henderson?" I asked, though I already knew why he was calling. "They're threatening to leave," Henderson called this morning, said they want to meet with the controlling partner before they renew their contract. They want to make sure the company is stable after the divorce. I let the pause stretch. Richard needed this account. Without it, his 49% share of the business would be worth almost nothing. And we both knew no bank would loan him money to buy me out of the house with a failing business as collateral. "Schedule the meeting," I told him. "We'll see what they want to discuss." But I already knew what Henderson wanted to discuss. James Henderson and his wife Patricia had been at every charity event I had attended for 8 years. Patricia and I had served together on the funding committee for the women's shelter downtown. She knew exactly who had been developing the investment strategies that had grown their portfolio by 300% during our partnership. The meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday. Richard spent the weekend preparing presentations, practicing his pitch to save the account. He called me Sunday night to review strategy. I think if we offer them a reduced fee structure for the first year, just until things stabilize, they'll stay with us, he said. Us, I repeated. The firm. You know what I mean. Richard, when you talk to Henderson, what are you going to tell them about the firm's management structure? There was a long pause. I thought you could handle more of the background work and I could maintain the client relationships, like we've always done. Like we've always done, I echoed. Except Henderson thinks you've been doing the background work for 8 years. Another pause. Longer. Sarah, please, don't do this. You'll destroy everything we built together. Everything I built, Richard. You were just the face I hired to present my work. Tuesday morning, Patricia Henderson sat across from me in the conference room, smiling warmly. Her husband studied the financial reports Margaret had prepared, documenting exactly how the investment strategies had been developed and implemented. Mrs. Richardson, James said carefully, Richard has been telling us that there might be some changes in how the firm operates. Richard is correct, I replied. I'll be taking a more active role in client relationships going forward. Richard will be transitioning to a more advisory capacity. It was corporate speak for Richard becoming a very expensive employee with a minority ownership stake. Patricia leaned forward. James, I think this is exactly what we hope to hear. Sarah's strategies have been making us money for years. It's about time she got proper credit. The Henderson account stayed. Richard's role as their primary contact did not. Over the next 6 months, I took over direct management of every major client. Richard remained with the firm, but his duties gradually shifted to research and administrative tasks. He was good at those things. He had always been good at implementing other people's ideas. The business grew. Without Richard's expensive dinners and hidden personal charges, profit margins improved dramatically. I hired 2 new analysts, both women, both brilliant. The firm's reputation for innovative investment strategies spread beyond our traditional client base. Melissa found a new job at a competing firm. She sent me one more text before she stopped reaching out. I hope you can forgive him eventually. He's not a bad person. She was right. Richard wasn't a bad person. He was just a selfish one. A man who had grown comfortable taking credit for work he didn't do, spending money he didn't earn, and planning a future based on assets he didn't own. But selfishness and bad are different things entirely. 1 year after the divorce, Richard came to my office to discuss selling his stake in the company. The monthly spousal support payments were barely covering his rent, and Melissa was gone, having decided that a 49% partner wasn't the long-term security she had thought she was getting. I never understood what you were capable of, he said, sitting across from my desk in the chair where clients usually sat. I don't think I ever really saw you at all. You saw what you needed to see, I replied. A woman who would take care of everything so you could focus on being successful. You just forgot to ask where your success was actually coming from. He signed the buyout papers that afternoon. The terms were fair, generous even. I paid him current market value for his 49% stake, enough for him to start over somewhere else. Enough to remember me kindly, if he chose to. But I kept the consulting firm, and the house, and the investment portfolio I had built stock by stock over 15 years of careful planning. That evening, I walked through the house that was finally, completely mine. 15 years of shared space, shared decisions, shared dreams that had turned out to be individual dreams that never aligned. In the kitchen where I had planned Richard's business strategies while he watched television, I poured wine from a bottle I had chosen without consulting anyone's preferences. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was full of possibility. My phone rang. Margaret, calling with updates on a new case she wanted me to consider. Another brilliant woman whose husband had underestimated her financial acumen. Would you be willing to consult? Margaret asked. She's been managing their real estate portfolio for 12 years while he takes client meetings and signs papers. Now he's filing for divorce and claiming she's just a housewife. I looked around my kitchen, my house, my life that no one could take from me now. Send me her information, I said. I'll teach her what I learned. Because that's what Richard had never understood about the woman he married. I wasn't just building our life together. I was building a foundation that could survive anything, including him. The gun had been pointed at himself all along. He just never bothered to look down before pulling the trigger.